In genealogy and family history, context means everything. This episode of History Unscripted is centered all around it. Context exists and is missing all around us. You're looking at an ordinary courthouse square, but 134 years ago, a black woman named Eliza Woods was taken from jail, dragged down this street, lynched from a tree that sits in this square, and shot as she hanged, all for a crime she didn't commit. Today, there is not a single indication that this horrific event even took place here. It's business as usual. But in a few short months, a sign will finally be erected to give context to this public space after a year-long fight with the county commission to just admit the truth permanently in public. There's a battle for context going on in America if you didn't know it. The question is, who will win? Where do we even start? Well, actually, I will just read to you the text from our first article. Melville teacher has significant remorse over assignment referencing slave trade.
I pulled down it was a 4-page document where she wanted the students to, one of the questions was set your price for a bushel of grain, and then one of the prices was for slaves. You know, what would you set a price on for them? So of course, she met some backlash with that. And I'm like, okay, this is not just a random school. My nieces and nephews went to this school district. And so she said, you own a plantation or farm and therefore need more workers. You begin to get involved in the slave trade industry and have slaves work on your farm. Your product to trade is slaves. Set your price for a slave. She put a blank line. These could be worth a lot of points. How can you put a price on a human life? You can't. The students in the class, they had to take that assignment home. How do you think their parents are going to feel? I was taken aback when I saw that. This was fifth graders, by the way. So fifth graders don't really have a clue unless, they're really into family stuff. And even then, they're still kind of young. But this was at Blaze Elementary School in the Melville School District. And as it stated, culturally insensitive, and that it was.
Different educational projects online to deal specifically with this issue. They're large initiatives too. I mean, there's the Zin project also.
Then
there's another one out of Johns Hopkins I can't think of, but every year they send school teachers so that they get American history right. It's complicated, and to just kind of reduce it to this it's just absurd. I mean, and it's not, and you said the value of a human life. I mean, also we have to also acknowledge that people are still being traded in jails,
Exactly.
So the same thing is still going on.
Exactly.
So maybe that's what you should use for the next lesson,
Right.
But this is like the fifth one for 2019 that hit the news. I think it seemed like every other month there was another story about somebody, and usually it involves a white teacher having this culturally insensitive lesson plan that apparently nobody reviews.
I mean, did a light bulb go off in your head? So maybe I should think twice about this, or how would this be perceived? Look at the environment that we're in right now. Right. We're in a emotionally charged, racially charged administration right now. Even with with our leader of the country, and then to do this, you're just like stoking, add more fuel to the fire.
And another thing, OGS actually, not last year, the year before, at their national conference, and those that don't know what OGS is the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society, known as OGS. And they hosted a panel at the conference on education on slavery. And we had a teacher, 25-year teacher. We had someone at the collegiate level and so on and so forth. And everyone's input was positive that it needed to be done, but how it was to be done was where the learning curve needed to come up. It's how much and how you present the information. And you can't just go for the gut per se to show that truth. But what you have to understand is also that fifth grader, fourth grader, whoever it is, how they process information. So the Zen project so far and PBS's project, they have an education for, I'm going to say elementary school or middle school, seem to have been successful. And I think it's how you introduce the information.
Right.
Parents need to be starting that information. And I think the schools and the parents together should be able to bring that to ease, especially for children of color, because that's possibly their heritage, being free or enslaved, but to understand all of the atrocities that happened, to the culture and things. And so people now, I think it's more on the front page because people are fighting back, number one, for the truth knowledge, and number two, how do we stop it and reverse it? Because we all have to live here together.
Right.
So, and I think it starts with our children. If we educate them right. That's why I think it's more important to first understand who you are and where you come from and know your family history. So that's
well, Annette, being somebody who's removed from the historical and genealogical space, what did you say when you first heard about this?
I mean, it just made me angry because there's a way you can be respectful to history and still tell an honest story. Because what I would have done is says, yes, we understand that these are slaves, these were people, and that's horrible. But for the sake of this exercise, we're going to say, yes, these were slaves, but we'll say from a commodities perspective, we can call them cattle because that's how they were treated. And say you have bulls, you have cows, and you have calves. And then you can go ahead and name your price for that because that's basically how we were treated then. And you can be respectful and you can be, honest about how it was, and to a point where you're not angering people. But I feel like this teacher was just tone deaf or just flat out ignorant. I mean, unless you were born 10 seconds ago, you're going to know this part of history. You know what happened. You know how much this is angering people. And just like Ms. Linda said, how that the current atmosphere is right now. You can't tell me that teacher didn't know what she was doing. You can't tell me she didn't know what she was doing. And either she was just being ignorant or maybe she was trying to play devil's advocate. I don't know. But I don't understand how someone can be just like, oh, I'm super remorseful about something I had to know I was doing. I mean, come on. You can't be so... So
if she wanted to educate the students on slavery and that whole era, I think she should have taken her idea to the parent-teacher PTO. She should have taken it to the administrator and vetted it out, fleshed it out, and make it to where it's not so insensitive. I don't know how you can not be. I don't know how you can be sensitive. That's a touchy subject, depending, because some of us don't know our history.
Right.
We know slavery existed. We know we have ancestors come through there, but they really don't know because they haven't taken the time either with some of us. So they will be the first to jump on the bandwagon to see her removed. So, but I think some training is needed here. I think it needs to be taught in school, but how it's taught and how it's introduced is going to make all the difference in the world.
True. What do you have to say about this?
A lot of this, I probably was on the bandwagon of being offensive, but I'm also looking at it from the point of view of when I was a child and I had no Black teachers, and I'm just wondering where was this, like Ms. King said, we're in this era where, you know, you do have some type of resource where you should have been going to another teacher or, you know, vetting this out on what to do. And Shelley named 2 resources. I think she said the Zen Project and PBS. And then you think about how we're as grown-ups, how the 1619 Project works into all of this. Like, where are we going to go for these teachers to, on a platform for them to go to teach these at each level? So I'm looking like, is that going to help us out here?
I really like that, True, because I work in an environment where I'm involved with diversity and inclusion, EEO, and affirmative action. That's a teaching moment.
Mhm.
It's a teaching moment for the school districts at large. It's a teaching moment for even parents, PTO. I don't think they should let that just die for the article. I think they need to pick that up as a teaching moment.
Right.
That's a good idea.
I would think that there's other historical organizations, local organizations that would be happy to send a representative to the school so that they could do presentations with the school,
Right.
you know?
I know.
Now, she
I wish
was-
that, yeah.
She
I
was
wish
The one thing I will add, though, to the conversation is that too many organizations have the money to spend on education for this in the crisis assessment, right? Or when the crisis team comes in to do all the damage control on behalf of them
Okay.
for the, right?
Not
Like that's when they have,
proactive.
come on now, that's when they have time to invest in education for this. But one of the things that sticks out to me about this article is that the principal says, and I quote, "This was an attempt to teach market practices." So this was not even about slavery. This was about teaching market practices. Now, that's not to say that teachers shouldn't spend the time to educate their students about a lot of different things under the heading of the main subject matter of whatever the kids are supposed to take back, right? Like my husband does that all the time. He'll talk to the students and he'll mention something like he might say a jerry curl. It might be that random. And because he teaches computer applications and maybe that week they're learning to design newsletters, so he'll have them design newsletters about the makers of jerry curl products. Like that will be their way of learning about something they didn't know about, but also learning the core concepts that you need for whatever the assignment is. And so if you're teaching market practices, I think Annette's example about cattle or like animals is perfect, or food. Like, here's the thing, teach them what a bushel is. How is a bushel different, right? That involves math, that also involves critical thinking. So, you know, so that's the thing. I think part of the problem with this is, and I don't want to say the teacher was lazy, because I don't believe that. I just think that they have no cultural competence at all. And when you have no cultural competence and your world is surrounded by people who are not from this space or who don't descend from this space, you are completely tone deaf and you can't even recognize that you are. So what do you all think? I mean, because clearly this removes the voices of the enslaved, right? Because it commodifies them. It makes them dollar amounts. How could this have been flipped? There was one example gave about, you know, replacing with animals. What else do you think could be done? Because here's the thing. These are school districts. They're already strapped for money and resources. They may not be able to afford to buy a curriculum that appropriately addresses this. So what do you do as a teacher in the classroom who wants to address slavery in a state that practiced slavery? Let's remind people that Missouri was a slave state. Because I think in some ways it's eclipsed its slave stateness over time.
Well, is there any states that were not? And I'm going east of the Mississippi now. Were there any states, because the northern states had slavery just like the South? And so, number one, there's one avenue. Don't just put it totally on the South, educate the truth. I really think there should not have been punishment.
right.
And that this again is the teaching moment opportunity,
Exactly.
one of you said. And I think that's what's critical.
Right.
I'm not gonna be mad at the teacher. I think whatever her background is and in her world, she might have thought she was doing something good to educate because of the climate of the country, the world right now. But her methods might not have been the best.
Right.
But she started the conversation, and look what's rippling. We've got it as a topic.
To wrap this up, though, everyone's looking for a gotcha moment right now. That's the
Yes.
society
Oh,
that we're
yeah.
living in.
That's so sad.
And, and it's so sad. It's like, oh, gotcha. Like everyone is
wants to
like,
go viral.
yeah, and it's like for all the wrong
Mhm.
reasons. And
Right.
and this should not, it should not be the case. And you know what? Speaking of somebody wanting to go viral for all the wrong reasons, let's move into our next story. Headline, and I quote, to recognize Black History Month, GOP lawmaker proposes a list of mostly white people.
I can't. I just.
In Wisconsin this February, one lawmaker wants to mark Black History Month by celebrating 10 Americans, including a Civil War colonel, a newspaper editor, and a church deacon. All are heralded for their bravery, but most on the list are white.
We just acknowledged the teacher who we're making assumption had no ill intent.
Right.
And then you got this other person knowing it's going to go viral.
As Barbara would say, a fool.
A fool. But also that's building base. There's a whole nother strategy there. That's building base on the level of where that person's at, this, that, and other. I hate to put everybody in one category regarding this, but they're in that category. And
But
that's building that base.
Isn't this potentially the danger of teaching these assignments and not qualifying them later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
The resolution circulated this month identifies a group of people integral to the state's Underground Railroad system, both slaves who traveled it and abolitionists who sheltered them. The author, State Rep. Scott Allen, Republican, says it's a sincere effort to salute important historical figures, but several Black legislators have called the effort disingenuous and said it undermines the purpose of Black History Month. Why? I gotta put my voice back on so I can do Miss Lena, because Miss Lena came through and saved the day on this article, y'all. She did. Representative Lena Taylor, she's a Democrat. I can guarantee you my family in Milwaukee knows her, so I'm just going to, through proxy, I'm like, please give Lena a pat on the back for your quote this article. She said, why should you be leading what we do on Black History Month? The fact that this even needs to be discussed is a reflection of where we are as a society. Read, I wake up every day as a Black woman, comma. I got to put that comma in there. Allen said he knows the optics are bad, quote, here I am, this white guy proposing this resolution that honors some white people during Black History Month. And those are easy headlines to put out there and run with, he said in an interview. But his intent, Allen said, was to craft a resolution that would also appeal to his white Republican colleagues, who in the past have accused the Legislative Black Caucus of politicizing the list of honorees. I'd rather we work together to pass a resolution the Republican caucus can be excited about, Allen said. If we can do that one simple thing, then we can start attacking tougher issues. Now here we go. Hold your horses, carriages, and all purses. Because when I tell you, Lena,
here we go.
Lena, I've got to turn around in the chair for this one.
All the way now.
Because Lena came with it, and I'm telling you, I'm going to find somebody that knows Lena before the end of the day.
I'm here for this.
I'm so here for this. But Taylor, who is also running for mayor of Milwaukee, said the resolution is patronizing, read. In an email to Allen, she compared him to a slave owner trying to control how Black Wisconsinites memorialize their history. And I quote, thank you, Master Allen, for picking whose we should honor. We sure ain't capable of thinking for ourselves, sir. And that's all I'm going to read from this article. What say you, panel?
And that is like
in a southern state.
No, it is not.
She probably migrated there from Mississippi.
Well, hello, thank you, right? Think of Great Migration. Yeah. Look at your major highway lines, right? That go up to, to Midwestern states like Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Chicago, Detroit, Gary, right? Her family probably is from Arkansas or Mississippi. So what do we have to say about this? Because in this environment we're living in, you all, everybody's always talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? We kind of hit on that a little bit when Linda talked about the work that she does outside of genealogy. And this is someone making an attempt to be equitable and to have diversity and inclusion. But what makes it problematic that it's happening during Black History Month?
But as it was just mentioned, I mean, it's only 28 days. Why do we have to share the 28 days with everybody else? Are you kidding me? I mean, March 1st. You can have March 1st to
No, he
December
can't.
31st.
That's my birthday. He can have March 2nd.
March 2nd to December 31st. You can have all the rest of the days of the year.
Okay. And we get the extra day this year for leap year.
Right,
so we
right.
can have March 2nd.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and I just wonder too, I don't know, how this would fit in, but isn't this always about what we're talking about sometimes when the folks try to center it on center it on themselves? Like,
right.
do you think there's any of that play coming in on in here? And I mean, is that his definition of diversity in that city? Because I know Milwaukee, that's like where it's heavily concentrated there, and they have a good history of, the Native American history. Of course, they're African American. They just don't play around there about that.
In other words, I think white America, like that person that said that, about honoring these other people, can't handle the African American stuff that's being exposed now, the truth, some history, because there is a lot of push of the exposure and education of African Americans in this country. Well, there you have those that are having a problem with that. Number one is talking about what their folks might have done or been part of. And here comes that fear and that guilt stuff. So how do you combat? Oh, you can't have that just by yourself. We need to also talk about these people, because that was also going on. Where do we need to step up and also combat what he's doing? So we need to give the facts right back. Let's do his genealogy. What does he have in his history?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Right.
I'm thinking of this locally, but then you're taking it over here to how this can, be another lesson. Yeah.
Y'all know we nosy. I see 5 people on this screen who can do it. Now, let me remind folks of the composition of Milwaukee, because I think this often gets overlooked when we're talking about Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason why I have to say this is because the 38.8% of Black folks that live in Milwaukee are Atlases.
I don't have a problem diving in and looking this family up.
I know, but that's why when you're local and grassroots and we're talking about this on a local level and we know this area, that was out of place for Mr. Allen to even be doing that. And like I said, in that heavily populated area that's been like that, for years. But you can take it out of Milwaukee and put this on a national level, like you said, with the comments and whatnot. But
well, I will have you know that there was a media advisory sent out by the Republican Party of Milwaukee on January 2nd that said that Scott Allen announces a meeting of local community members and Republican Party activists on Tuesday, January 7th to discuss possible modifications. Modifications.
Ain't no modifications. It is what it is.
Play into the base.
So they picked their own people.
Yep.
Now, granted, this is open to the public because this is involving legislators and stuff like that. But who's to say, right, that folks will be welcomed or will be made to feel welcome, and that their opinions will be made to feel like they're being heard at that particular thing. This happened 4 days ago. I've just looked for press to see if there was any update. I don't see anything, but I've got a link here at the top for a MAGA rally in Milwaukee for you-know-who, and a Reagan Day dinner at the top of the page. They did gather at Starbucks, so that does give me a little bit more of a kind of a warm and fuzzy feeling.
Starbucks shopping for me.
Well, they met at Starbucks, so that's what I'm saying. It's open.
Reason.
Yeah, it's open, but so how could this? That's the thing. I think this is literally whataboutism in legislative form, right? When you go into comment areas of websites, news stories, right? There's always about, well, what about, anything about slavery? Well, my family they were Italian slaves, or my folks were looked down upon. It's always the what about versus dealing with the issue at hand. And so, and I think you're right, Shelley. I think because people are being cold pressed hard and, kind of pressed together, and being forced to examine their own biases, I think that's the reason why we're going to see a lot of this. And literally the equivalent of this in the UK right now is what's going on with Harry and Meghan Markle.
Yes.
Right.
Because we're made up of everybody else, we're still trying to build those towers from the 1600s. You know what I'm saying? Those early folks that came in, coming down the line, are still trying to dominate, that they're the superior race, they're this, they're that, type thing. And I think we've been holding pretty good as 2020, but they're acting up again. And I'm going to say it that way. They're just acting up again. We have more in common than they think. There is no superior race, and I think the ones that are still pushing that narrative need to be the ones that really need to be checked. They need to be checked. It's not a party. It's not a political thing. They need to look and seriously address where the messages are coming from and the root of where that message comes from. And this is not the time for me to say my opinion on that, but it's time to be checked.
If you have a family member or someone who is potentially thinking they don't quite understand, all this stuff that people are talking with racism and whatever, the perfect example with regard to how their mind works and operates, I actually have two now. The first one, ask them about the Central Park Five. Just ask them about that. Okay? Don't lead, don't anything. What do you know about the Central Park Five? And now my second example is, what do you think about Harry and Meghan and this whole situation?
Yeah.
This is, the documents say this. The recording says this. If I look at the UK press, especially the Daily Mail, and I look at stories where in one situation, they're talking about Kate and, oh, isn't it cute that she's rubbing her belly? And then they do a story on Meghan. They can't understand why she's touching her stomach. And is there something wrong with her? Right? Central Park 5, you've got the video evidence. You got the confession of the actual person. When someone refuses to believe the facts, the pieces of paper, the genuine articles that establish a fact in what we go on about an event, if somebody cannot accept those things, they are willingly choosing to do that.
I'm going to say it and then I'm going to shut up. The facts happen daily on our news channels. Exactly what you just described is what is going on in this country. You've got two bases. You got one that follows and one that can't figure out why they following. And we're not really understanding. You just described this country right now. The facts are in front of them and they can't even see it. They don't want to see it. That's why they can't. That's more
accurate. Yep.
And they got a leader of the pack. And that's a PACK, not a PAC. There's a difference.